He was invisible. At least, that's how they treated him. Ethan Cole pushed the mop across the marble floor of the glass tower downtown. Each stroke of the mop left behind a wet shine that vanished seconds later, absorbed into the polished stone as if his effort meant nothing at all. The building belonged to Rivers Global, one of the most powerful investment firms in the city. Executives in tailored suits rushed past him daily, their shoes clicking loudly, never slowing down, never acknowledging his presence. To them, he was part of the furniture. A man with gloves, a mop, and silence. But Ethan wasn't just a janitor. Not truly. Years ago, he had been something else, someone else. His mind carried a secret edge, a precision most people could never comprehend. Numbers spoke to him. Patterns revealed themselves where others saw only chaos. His memory was a steel trap. Once he read something, it was his forever. Equations, contracts, codes, languages. Nothing slipped away. But fate, cruel and indifferent, had pushed him into obscurity. His wife had fallen ill, treatments draining every penny. His daughter needed him present, not chasing promotions or prestige. So Ethan accepted the job at Rivers Global, trading recognition for stability, hiding his brilliance beneath a gray uniform and the silence of humility. And in this silence, arrogance thrived all around him. The tower was ruled by Victor Rivers, the CEO himself. A man feared more than respected, admired only for the wealth he commanded. He wore power like a weapon, his laughter cutting, his words often venom, disguised as charm. To Victor, people were chess pieces useful or disposable, depending on the day. He treated his boardroom like a battlefield, his staff like pawns, and men like Ethan, invisible. Victor's flaw was obvious to anyone willing to see. Pride so inflated it blinded him. He believed problems bowed before him, that talent could be purchased, that intellect lived only at the top of the tower. For a while, it seemed the universe agreed. His empire grew, investors flocked, and his arrogance deepened. But the cracks were coming, and Ethan would be the one to reveal them. It began on a Tuesday morning. The air inside the tower was tense, thick with whispers. Something had gone terribly wrong. Ethan noticed it before anyone spoke a word, executives pacing in sharp circles, assistants clutching folders like shields, Victor barking into his phone in a voice sharp enough to cut glass. By noon, the rumor had reached even the janitors. A crisis had erupted. Rivers Global had been negotiating a monumental international acquisition, one that would cement Victor's dominance across continents. Billions were on the line, reputations at stake. But the deal hinged on a single document, an ancient financial treaty written decades ago in old Cantonese, interlaced with archaic legal structures that even most modern lawyers couldn't decipher. The foreign partners demanded immediate resolution, clarity on a clause that determined the fate of the agreement. The firm's translators had failed. Their legal team was paralyzed. Every hour wasted tightened the noose. If they couldn't interpret the treaty by dawn, the acquisition would collapse, dragging Rivers Global down with it. Victor was raging, his empire teetering. He cursed at his staff, blamed their incompetence, threatened their jobs. Desperation crackled in the air like static. Yet for all his shouting, he had no solution. Pride had led him to this cliff's edge, and now even his power couldn't pull him back. Ethan listened quietly as he polished the brass railing outside the conference room. Words floated through the glass, fragments of panic and despair. He understood. He knew what the treaty meant. He remembered it. Years ago, during long nights of study, when he still believed his mind could change the world, he had devoured obscure legal texts. He had translated archaic Chinese scripts as a challenge to himself, fascinated by their complexity. Those symbols had carved themselves into his memory forever. He could help. He knew he could. But what chance did a janitor have of being heard? Still, something inside him stirred. Perhaps it was the thought of his wife's fragile smile, his daughter's uncertain future. Perhaps it was the weight of being invisible for too long. Whatever it was, Ethan felt a quiet fire burn within. He couldn't watch them fail while the solution pulsed in his veins. So, with mop in hand and heart pounding, Ethan stepped toward the lion's den. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Suits leaned over piles of documents. Translators muttered apologies. Lawyers rubbed their temples in defeat. And at the center, Victor Rivers sat like a king watching his empire crumble, fury etched into every line of his face. Ethan knocked once on the glass door. No one noticed. He opened it slowly, the squeak of the hinge cutting through the chaos. Heads turned. Silence fell, not out of respect, but disbelief. The janitor had walked in. Victor's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" He snapped. "Get out. This is not your floor." Ethan swallowed hard, then spoke, his voice calm but steady. "I can read it." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then laughter erupted. Derisive, sharp mocking. Executives shook their heads. Translators smirked. Lawyers exchanged incredulous glances. A janitor claiming mastery of ancient legal Cantonese? Absurd. Victor sneered. You? You mop floors. Do you think this is a joke? Do you think I'm in the mood for jokes? Ethan's hands trembled, but his eyes didn't falter. It's no joke. I can read the treaty. I know what it means. The mockery grew louder, feeding on itself. Victor leaned back in his chair, smirking. Fine. Entertain us then. Read it. Let's hear the wisdom of the mop. A page of the treaty was shoved into Ethan's hands. The ink was faded, the symbols intricate. But to Ethan, they glowed with familiarity. His eyes traced the lines, and in perfect, measured cadence, he translated aloud. Word after word poured from his lips, smooth and precise. He explained not just the literal meaning, but the legal context, the historical nuances, the hidden clauses that shifted power within the agreement. The room grew silent again, but this time in awe. The laughter died in throats. The translators leaned forward, stunned. The lawyers scribbled frantically. Victor's smirk vanished. By the time Ethan finished the passage, the truth was undeniable. The janitor had solved what their experts could not. He had unlocked the treaty, and with it, the salvation of Rivers Global. No one moved. The silence was heavy, trembling with revelation. Ethan handed the page back gently, then stepped away, his heart pounding in his chest. Victor stared at him, eyes burning with a mix of rage, humiliation, and reluctant admiration. For the first time, the king of the tower had been forced to bow, if only in silence, to the man he had never seen. That night stretched long. Ethan worked alongside stunned lawyers, guiding them through the treaty, explaining every clause, every hidden trap, every subtle turn of phrase. Hours melted away, yet his focus never faltered. His memory, his gift, carried them through the labyrinth. By dawn, the impossible was done. The deal was saved. Rivers Global would not collapse. And all because the invisible man had stepped into the light. But the dawn brought more than salvation. It brought consequences. For Ethan, for Victor, for everyone inside that tower. Because once the invisible is seen, it cannot be unseen. The morning sun pierced through the tall windows of the tower, flooding the boardroom with pale light. Executives sat slumped in their chairs, exhausted but relieved, papers scattered like fallen leaves after a storm. The crisis had been averted. The treaty was clear, the deal secure. And at the center of it all, still wearing his gray janitor's uniform, stood Ethan Cole. He should have felt triumphant. He had saved them. Yet in that moment, he felt only the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on him, as though they were trying to rewrite him in their minds. Hours ago, he had been a shadow, ignored. Now, he was the man who had dragged an empire back from the brink. Victor Rivers leaned forward, elbows on the polished oak table. His face was unreadable, a storm behind a mask. "Leave us," he ordered his staff. Reluctantly, they obeyed, filing out in stunned silence. Soon, only two men remained, the king of the tower and the janitor who had outshone them all. Victor's voice was low, dangerous. "Who are you, really?" Ethan hesitated. "I told you. I'm the janitor." Victor's fist slammed the table. "Don't mock me." His composure cracked, arrogance colliding with disbelief. "You spoke like a scholar, a lawyer, a linguist. That knowledge doesn't come from a mop bucket. So tell me, who are you?" Ethan's gaze dropped. His instinct was to hide, to remain invisible, to avoid the risk of exposure. But something inside had shifted. He was done shrinking. "I am what you see," he said quietly. "A man who cleans your floors, because life left me no choice. But I am also a man who remembers everything he reads, who understands the patterns others miss, who never forgot what he once studied, even when the world forgot him." Victor stared, lips parted slightly, as if trying to reconcile two impossible truths: that brilliance could live in silence, that genius could wear overalls. For the first time in years, Ethan saw uncertainty in Victor's eyes. The hours that followed spread like wildfire. Word leaked through the building, through whispers in elevators, through hurried texts among assistants, through stunned retellings by lawyers and translators who had witnessed the impossible. The janitor saved the deal. He read the treaty. He knew everything. By midday, the story had reached every floor. Employees who had never spoken Ethan's name before now searched for him with wide eyes. He became a ghost suddenly visible, his silence transformed into legend. Some looked at him with awe, others with suspicion. But no one could ignore him anymore. Victor hated it. He hated how the power shifted, how the name Ethan Cole carried more weight that morning than all his years of ruthless dominance. He hated that gratitude tasted like humiliation. Yet he could not deny the truth. The foreign partners signed the contract. Billions flowed into the firm. The newspapers celebrated Rivers Global's brilliance. But behind the headlines, every insider knew it had been the janitor who turned the tide. Victor's pride writhed, but even pride bows to survival. And so, in an act that stunned everyone, he summoned Ethan to his office. The CEO's office was a palace of glass and steel, perched above the city like a throne on high. Ethan stood at the doorway, his gray uniform a stark contrast against the polished expanse. Victor gestured for him to sit. The chair felt too soft, too expensive beneath Ethan's weight. "You saved this company," Victor began, his voice flat but deliberate. "I won't deny it. Without you, I'd be ruined. And I don't ignore debts." He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "What do you want, Ethan? Money? A title? Name it." The words hung in the air. Ethan thought of his wife's frail body, of the medical bills stacked like mountains, of his daughter's eyes filled with quiet fear each time the future was mentioned. He thought of the years spent wiping floors, hiding from himself, enduring contempt. "I want security," he said at last. "For my family, a future for my daughter. Not scrap stability. Respect." Victor arched a brow. "Respect cannot be bought." Ethan's lips curved in the faintest smile. "No, but it can be given, and it can be earned. Even by men like me." Silence stretched. Victor drummed his fingers on the desk, wrestling with something deeper than a business transaction. Finally, he spoke. "Then you'll have it. Effective immediately, you're no longer janitorial staff. I'm making you a senior consultant, special projects. Salary, benefits, authority. Your family will want for nothing." Ethan's breath caught. The offer was more than he had dared imagine. Yet it wasn't just the money that struck him. It was the acknowledgement, the public recognition that he was more than invisible. He nodded once. "I'll accept, but not for you." For them. Victor didn't reply. But for the first time, his gaze softened, just slightly, as though he glimpsed the cost of another man's quiet strength. The transformation rippled outward. Ethan's days of pushing a mop were gone. He now entered meetings in a suit, no longer ignored, but invited. Executives who once mocked him now sought his counsel, leaning on his memory, his logic, his uncanny ability to unravel complexities. Where others saw chaos, Ethan carved clarity. Contracts, codes, financial strategies, nothing escaped him. But his rise wasn't just personal. It forced change in the tower itself. Victor Rivers, the man once defined by arrogance, began to shift. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. He spoke less like a tyrant, more like a leader. He asked questions. He listened. He even, on occasion, thanked those beneath him. The transformation shocked his staff, but the lesson had been seared into him. Greatness can hide in the places you least expect, and pride can blind you until the fall. For Ethan, life outside the tower changed just as profoundly. His wife received the best treatments money could buy. Her health, once a crumbling wall, began to stabilize. His daughter's education was secured, her future bright and wide open. Their small, fragile home grew warm again, filled with laughter instead of fear. He had given them the one thing they needed most, peace. And yet, Ethan never forgot. He remembered the years of invisibility, the cruel laughter in the conference room, the way his worth had been dismissed until it was convenient to acknowledge. He wore his success not as a crown, but as armor. He refused to become like Victor had been. When he walked through the tower now, he saw every face: the receptionists, the security guards, the cleaning staff still moving silently through the halls. He greeted them by name. He asked about their lives. He made sure they were seen, because he knew too well what it cost to live as a ghost. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the culture of Rivers Global began to shift. Respect trickled downward, acknowledgement spread. The invisible became visible. It wasn't just an empire of finance anymore. It became, at last, an empire of people. Months later, Ethan stood again in the CEO's office. But this time, it was different. Victor sat across from him, shoulders less rigid, eyes less sharp. "I used to believe," Victor admitted quietly, "that power meant control. That success meant standing above others. But you showed me something else. Power is nothing without humility. Success is nothing if it leaves others unseen." Ethan said nothing, letting the words settle. Victor extended his hand, not as a command, not as a transaction, but as respect. Ethan shook it. In that moment, the man who once ruled with arrogance bowed not in submission, but in recognition of equality. Years passed. Ethan's name became legend in the firm, his story whispered like a parable. The janitor who saved the empire. The invisible man who proved that brilliance hides where pride refuses to look. His wife lived to see their daughter graduate, strong and unafraid. His family thrived. Ethan himself aged with dignity, his silence now carrying not invisibility, but wisdom. And when he finally retired, he left not as a man dismissed, but as a man celebrated. His farewell gathering filled the tower, voices rising in gratitude, eyes filled with respect. Victor Rivers spoke last, his voice uncharacteristically steady. "This man taught me the greatest lesson of my life, that the measure of power is not in wealth or fear, but in the ability to see the unseen." Ethan Cole was never just our janitor. He was, and always will be, the mind and the heart that saved us. Applause thundered through the room. Ethan stood quietly, his eyes misting, his heart heavy with the weight of years. He had been invisible once, but no longer. And as he walked away from the tower for the last time, sunlight warming his face, he carried with him the truth that had guided his journey. Dignity is not given by others. It is claimed by refusing to be forgotten.